So, we are going to talk about a very sad topic here at the top of the show, and that is torture. When it came out years ago that the Bush administration tortured captives, be it at Guantanamo Bay, at Abu Ghraib, at black sites all around the globe, it was something that was really shameful. It was heartbreaking. For many people, it was a wake-up call to America's violent aggression towards the Middle East. One of the types of torture that we did was waterboarding, where you lean someone back on a board, you cover their face, you pour water down their throats and their nostrils. Some call it simulated drowning, but if you keep going and you don't stop, you can drown them. They call it simulated drowning because you stop, but if you were to continue pouring water down someone's throat, you could drown them. So we did that, right? That's well known. It's well documented. We did that. We did waterboarded, among other types of torture. That came out. Images of other types of torture that we did came out. The images from Abu Ghraib. As a country, after those revelations, essentially we did nothing. Those who tortured got away with it. Those who authorized the torture got away with it. We had the shameful, heartbreaking debate on all the Sunday news shows that is waterboarding torture, is drowning somebody torture. That whole exercise was sick. The fact that we allowed that debate to happen, the fact that that debate did happen was frankly disgusting, right? One argument that was made, that thus on the left made to try to reason with the bloodthirsty torture crowd, other than just the obvious moral imperative that torture is wrong and immoral. But one thing we did, one argument that we tried to make over and over again, was that if we torture people, it will make it easy and justifiable for so-called enemies of the United States to do it to our soldiers, to our captives, that we would lose the moral high ground by, if we do it, we can't really condemn other people when they do it, because that's sort of, obvious, right? The fact that the debate had to get to that point should tell you a lot about the so-called morality of a large swath of Americans, right? Hell, even today, polls show that I think a majority of Americans think that torture in circumstances is okay and fine. But, us on the left we tried to reason with those who thought that torture was okay by saying, hey, just think about what might happen to one of our own. This last week, the Washington Post had a story on James Foley, the journalist who was, I'm sure you probably have heard, beheaded by ISIS. They reported that James Foley and at least three other Americans, in addition, obviously James Foley was executed, but he, along with three other Americans, had been waterboarded by ISIS and they did mock executions on him as well. But we'll start on the waterboarding here. And I need to pause just for a minute here and say, I never knew James Foley personally. However, one of my closest friends and part of the Matthew Filipowicz Show, Nick Garcia, a.k.a. Bob Rock, was actually good friends with James when James lived in Chicago, Illinois. I know other people who knew him, but I'm also friends with a lot of journalists who go into dangerous areas, like James did in Syria, to try to tell the actual stories of the victims of war, to tell the stories of the consequences of war, because, a lot of times we get our government's version of how a war is going, and not actually the story from the people on the ground. And that's what James was doing in Syria when he was kidnapped. He was trying to actually tell, document what was going on to people in Syria when he was kidnapped. So the Washington Post reports that James Foley, in addition to being horrifically executed, was also tortured and waterboarded. And this whole story just makes me sick. And I'm going to pause again to say something that to me is obvious, but I want it to be clear for maybe if some crazy right-wingers are listening to the show here. Let me be clear. ISIS is horrible. They are monsters. What they did to James Foley was evil. Pure and simple. It was evil. And my heart breaks for his family, for his friends. My heart breaks for my friend Nick. It is really, really depressing and infuriating to think that we as a country no longer have the moral standing to be able to condemn torture. Shouldn't we be able to do that? Shouldn't we as a country be able to condemn torture? Doesn't that seem like something that we should be able to do? And look, thinking about this, I know as a country, historically and even right now, historically we've done a lot of horrific things. We continue to do a lot of horrific things as part of, American empire. We built our country on slavery. We wiped out an indigenous population. We've started wars. We still do drone strikes. We still do assassinations. All of that. But still, seriously, how sad is it that we as a country have gone so far down this rabbit hole that we can't even condemn torture anymore? Can't we be better than that? I mean, really, can't we be better than that? I even have to wonder, watching this whole thing play out, does Dick Cheney think what happened to James Foley and the other Americans, does he think that was torture when they were waterboarded? Was that torture in Dick Cheney's eyes? Or does he see it as enhanced interrogation? That's what he and all of his other torture lovers in the Bush administration and right-wingers and even some centrists called it. They called it enhanced interrogation. Not to mention the fact that it was, Dick Cheney and George W. Bush's war of aggression in Iraq that destabilized the entire Middle East, which led to the influx of Iraqi refugees going into Syria, which led to the destabilization of Syria, which led to the vacuum, which ISIS then filled. But really, we can't even condemn torture anymore as a country. And, Bush did the torture, but the Bush administration did the torture. Sadly, a lot of the responsibility of us not being able to condemn the torture rests at the feet of President Obama and the Obama administration. A lot of my liberal friends tell me, look, Matt, Barack Obama condemned torture. He stopped the waterboarding program. What do you really want President Obama to do in a situation like this when he came into office? And it's really very simple, and I don't think it's that complicated. He should have held those who did it accountable. Don't, lightly and, just brush off, say something like, well, we tortured some folks, like he did. He said that just kind of off the cuff. We tortured some folks. And then go on to say, those who did the torture, although I think it was wrong, they were patriots, which he also said about a month ago. So what do I want? What do I wish Obama would have said? Here's what I wish Obama would have said right when he came into office. Obama gets sworn in, maybe not on the steps when he gets sworn in, but the next day, I would have loved Obama to go and give an address where he said straight up to the American people, we tortured people. We tortured human beings. It was a crime. In order to ensure that never happens again, that we never do it again, I am ordering a full criminal investigation into all acts of United States torture. Those who tortured will be held accountable to the fullest extent of both the United States and international law. Those who designed and authorized the torture will also be held accountable to the fullest extent of both the United States and international law. We believe in the rule of law in the United States to the extent that even when those at the highest levels of power break the law, they will be held to account. There is no debate on torture. It is a crime, and those who did it and those who authorized it will face justice. Pretty simple, right? Seems like a pretty good and moral thing for a president to say. But instead, we got Obama's "we're going to look forward, not backward" policy. And, to this day, we have all of the Bush war criminals are still on television now saying, we need to invade Syria. We need to invade Iraq again. Can't we do better? Can't we be better? We'll be right back.